In December of 2023, the Los Angeles Dodgers agreed to pay a man $700 million to play baseball.
Yeah, 700 million.
700 million. Now, if you're listening to this right now and thinking, wait, how is that even a real number?
Right.
Like, how can a sports league allow that kind of financial concentration? Well, you are absolutely not alone.
Oh, definitely not.
Because the other 29 owners in Major League Baseball were asking the exact same question.
They were panicking, honestly.
Totally. But the craziest part wasn't the staggering number on the marquee. It was the fine print.
The deferrals.
Exactly. For the next 10 years, while this player's actually wearing the uniform, hitting the home runs, pitching in the World Series, he will only see $2 million a year.
Just $2 million, which,
Yeah.
I mean, in baseball terms, is basically minimum wage for a superstar.
Right. The rest is deferred. It's this financial magic trick of such massive proportions that it fundamentally broke the way we understand team building.
It really did. It was a transaction that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. I mean, it wasn't just a contract. It was a declaration of absolute empire.
A declaration of empire. I love that phrasing. And that concept, the empire, is exactly what we are dissecting today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are incredibly thrilled to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're looking past the daily box scores, past the highlight reels, to ask a much larger question. What does it actually cost to engineer sporting immortality?
Because it's not cheap, and it's not accidental.
No, not at all. When you look at the sweeping, century-long history of Major League Baseball, you realize that true dynasties are meticulously crafted machines.
Right.
They're built with unique currencies. Sometimes that currency is the sheer gravitational force of a superstar's personality.
Like a cultural icon.
Exactly. Sometimes it's clinical, cold-blooded boardroom efficiency. And sometimes, like today, it's algorithmic financial modeling and, frankly, private equity-level manipulation of the rule book.
Which is what makes this specific exploration so fascinating. We're looking at a landscape of athletic dominance that is honestly incredibly murky.
Yeah.
Like, diagnosing a dynasty isn't a binary process. You can't just pour concrete into a blueprint and point at the finished skyscraper.
Right. It's way messier than that.
Exactly. You're looking at the collision of human fallibility, immense cultural pressure, geographical shifts, and occasionally pure, unexplainable, physics-defying magic.
So to map out this anatomy of an empire for you, we brought a massive stack of sources to the table today.
A really heavy stack.
Yeah, we're pulling from deep historical biographies from the Society for American Baseball Research, or SABR for short.
The gold standard for baseball history.
Completely. We've also got intricate architectural histories detailing the game's greatest, most sacred stadiums.
The literal foundations.
Right. Plus contemporary StatCast physics data that measures the modern game down to the millimeter. And crucially, we have the absolute latest, up-to-the-minute, June 2026 mid-season all-star voting reports.
Which are just mind-blowing.
They really are. We have all the pieces. But if we really want to understand the modern financial superweapon that the Dodgers have built out on the West Coast, we cannot start in the present.
No, you have to go back.
We have to start in the Gilded Age. We have to look at the ghosts they're currently chasing.
Because you have to establish the standard by which all of this is measured, right? And in the history of North American professional sports, the absolute baseline for the word dynasty was forged in 1927.
The 1927 New York Yankees. Murderers Row.
That's the one.
Reading through these historical accounts we pulled, I mean, they don't even sound like a baseball team.
No, they sound like a myth.
Yeah, they sound like a traveling circus of science fiction superstars that just swept across the nation, conquering everything in their path.
And science fiction is actually an incredibly apt way to describe how the American public perceived them at the time. You really have to remember the cultural climate of the 1920s.
The Roaring '20s.
Right. The country was surging. The jazz age was roaring. Industrialization was booming. The stock market was climbing to these dizzying heights.
Everything's getting bigger.
Exactly. And the Yankees became the ultimate visceral metaphor for the broadening, invincible shoulders of America. They were loud, they were powerful, and they were completely unapologetic.
And the raw statistics from that 1927 season completely back up the mythology. Like, I was looking at the standings from that year, and it is almost comical.
Oh, it's absurd.
They finished every single day of the season in first place, wire to wire. They never trailed the pack for a single morning.
Not once.
They went 110-44, winning the American League pennant by a staggering 19 games.
But the run differential is the metric that truly illustrates their sheer terror. Over the course of that 154-game season, they outscored their opponents by 376 runs.
Okay, let me stop you right there because we need to put that number into context for the listener. 376 runs.
This is massive.
If you break that down mathematically, they were averaging 2.4 more runs per game than the opposition.
Right.
So if you are an opposing pitcher and you wake up in your hotel room in New York knowing you have to face the Yankees that afternoon, before you have even eaten breakfast, before a single pitch is thrown, the math says you are already losing by nearly 3 runs.
Yeah. The mathematical inevitability of their offense created this profound psychological advantage. Opposing teams weren't just physically beaten. They were mentally broken before they took the field.
Completely intimidated.
And our SABR sources detail a legendary example of this psychological warfare. It happened right before the 1927 World Series against the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Oh, man, this is one of my favorite stories in the entire stack. So the Yankees travel to Pittsburgh for Game 1.
Right.
They step onto the field for batting practice. Now, batting practice is usually just a warm-up, right? A chance to get your timing down.
Just stretching the muscles.
Yeah, but the Yankees turned it into a theatrical display of dominance. They reportedly lined up at the plate and just started launching balls into the deepest parts of the bleachers, one after another after another.
So it's an absolute barrage.
And the Pirates were sitting in their dugout just watching this aerial assault. And the sheer concussive power of it intimidated them so badly that historical accounts suggest the series was over right then and there.
Before Game 1 even started.
Exactly. The Pirates were beaten in their own minds just watching the Yankees take practice swings. The subsequent 4-game sweep was basically just a formality.
But see, that level of intimidation doesn't just come from a good lineup. It requires larger-than-life figures.
Titans.
Yes. Men who cast a shadow so vast it covers the entire sport. And the 1927 Yankees possess the 2 largest, most contrasting shadows in baseball history, Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig.
The Sultan of SWAT and the Iron Horse. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with Ruth, because we toss his name around today as a synonym for greatness, right?
Yeah, like the Babe Ruth of sales.
Exactly, or the Babe Ruth of cooking. But the reality of the man is almost impossible to exaggerate. Our sources describe him as the 4th of July in a brass band and New Year's Eve all rolled into one.
That is quite the visual.
Isn't it? He was eccentric. He possessed these mighty legendary appetites off the field. He was volatile. But between the foul lines, he possessed total, undeniable, paradigm-shifting excellence.
And paradigm shifting is the crucial phrase there, because he fundamentally transformed the geometry and the philosophy of the game itself. Before Babe Ruth, teams played what was called inside baseball.
Right. And for anyone listening who doesn't know what inside baseball means in a literal historical sense, it was a game of inches and ground balls.
Very tactical.
Yeah, we're talking about the Baltimore chop, which was this strategy where a hitter would deliberately swing down and chop the ball into the hard-packed dirt directly in front of home plate.
To make it bounce way up high.
Exactly, causing it to bounce high into the air, giving the batter enough time to sprint to first base safely. It was all about bunting, stealing bases, manufacturing one single run at a time through speed and opportunism.
It was a small, quiet game.
And Ruth comes along and proves that you could render all of that intricate small ball strategy completely obsolete with one single massive uppercut swing.
He just changed the math. He made the home run, which was previously considered a rare, almost freak occurrence, the absolute focal point of the sport.
The main event.
Right. In 1927, he hit his fabled 60 home runs. That record stood for decades. But he was far more than just a blind slugger.
Yeah, the SABR stats back that up.
They do. That same year, he scored 158 runs. He drew 137 walks, meaning pitchers were absolutely terrified to throw him anything over the plate.
They wouldn't even challenge him.
No, they refused. And his slugging percentage, which for the listener measures the total number of bases a player records per at-bat, was an astronomical .772.
The biographies actually note that his presence was viewed as Einsteinian by the public.
I love that detail.
It's wild. Scientists literally wanted to examine him in laboratories. They wanted to test his eyesight, his auditory reflexes, his hand-eye coordination.
Because they couldn't believe he was normal.
Exactly. They genuinely hypothesized that he might be biologically distinct from the rest of humanity.
Well, he was the loud, booming headline of the American era. But what's fascinating here is that while Ruth was generating all the noise and capturing the public's imagination, the actual churning engine of that 1927 lineup was hitting right behind him in the order.
Right. The man sports writers dubbed the Gibraltar in cleats, Lou Gehrig.
Gehrig was the ultimate stoic counterweight to Ruth's incredible chaotic noise.
The complete opposite personality.
Completely. Ruth was the nightlife, Gehrig was the punching of the time clock, and if you look strictly at the numbers in 1927, Gehrig's season is arguably even more impressive than Ruth.
Which honestly sounds like blasphemy. But the stats don't lie.
They really don't. Gehrig actually out-hit Ruth in batting average that year, .373 to .356. Yeah. He racked up more extra base hits, hitting 117 to Ruth's 97. He led the entire major leagues in doubles and total bases. And then there is the run production.
This is the crazy stat.
Gehrig drove in an astronomical 173 runs.
173 runs batted in. That is a video game number on the easiest setting.
It's hard to even comprehend.
For a listener today, it is almost impossible to conceptualize driving in that many runs in a single season. Because think about it, to do that, you have to be coming to the plate with runners on base constantly.
Which means the guys in front of you are doing their job.
Right, and then you have to deliver a clutch hit almost every single day for 6 months straight. It requires an agonizing level of stamina and focus.
Which is exactly what Gehrig possessed.
Yeah.
But here is where our deep dive into the SCBR research throws a massive wrench into everything we just discussed.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Despite this overwhelming mythological dominance, despite the 110 wins and the 60 home runs and the pirate sweeping intimidation, the 1927 Yankees might not actually be the most dominant team of their own era.
Okay, wait. If you ask anyone on the street, anyone anywhere in the world to name the greatest baseball team of all time, they say the 27 Yankees.
Unanimously.
It's an undisputed cultural fact. What are the sources saying?
They're saying that cultural facts are often shaped by media markets, not math.
Ooh, interesting.
Because just 1 year later, a new dynasty emerged in Pennsylvania. Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics. From 1928 to 1932, the Athletics put together a 5-year run that statistically eclipses anything the Yankees ever did.
Really?
Yeah, over that span, the Athletics had a .662 winning percentage.
Let me make sure I'm hearing that correctly. A .662 winning percentage over 5 years. That is higher than any 5-year period for any Yankees team in the history of the franchise.
Exactly. Not the Ruth teams, not the Joe DiMaggio teams of the 40s, not the Mickey Mantle teams of the 50s, and not the Derek Jeter teams of the 90s. The Philadelphia Athletics won at a higher, more consistent rate.
But how? I mean, if they didn't have Murderer's Row, if they didn't have the two largest shadows in the sport hitting 60 home runs and driving in 173 runs, how are they mathematically superior?
It came down to a fundamentally different philosophy of team building, run prevention.
Defense.
Right. Now, the Athletics had their own Hall of Famers, of course. Jimmy Fox, Al Simmons, Mickey Cochran, and an incredibly dominant pitcher named Lefty Grove.
So they weren't scrubs.
Far from it. But their true superiority was in pitching and defense. We use a metric today called WAR wins above replacement.
Right, which essentially calculates how many more wins a player or a unit contributes to their team compared to just a standard replacement level minor leaguer.
Exactly. So if you look at WAR in 1929, the Yankees pitching staff actually ranked dead last in the American League.
Wait, dead last?
Dead last in WAR. Meanwhile, the Athletics pitching staff ranked first.
So the Yankees were basically just outslugging their own terrible pitching. They were winning games like 9-7.
Precisely. Furthermore, the Athletics consistently led the league in defensive efficiency.
What does that mean in practice?
It means that when a batter hit a ball into play, the Athletics fielders turned that batted ball into an out far more reliably than the Yankees. They positioned themselves better, their baseball IQ was higher, and their pitchers threw to contact in ways that allowed the defense to work.
So they were a complete team.
Exactly. So while the Yankees outscored the Athletics on pure brute force offense, the Athletics vastly outpaced the Yankees in overall run differential because they simply suffocated the opposing teams. They prevented runs at a historic rate.
So if you were listening to this, you have to be asking the obvious question here. If the A's were statistically better, If their pitching was vastly superior, their defensive efficiency was tighter, and their 5-year winning percentage remains unmatched by any Yankee team in history, why do we solely worship the 27 Yankees?
It's a great question.
Why are Connie Mack's athletics largely a historical afterthought, relegated to trivia questions, while Murderer's Row is literal mythology?
It comes down to the currency of cultural gravity.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, Babe Ruth was not just a baseball player. He was the first modern American celebrity. He barnstormed across the country in the off-season, playing exhibition games in tiny rural towns where Major League Baseball didn't even exist.
He brought the spectacle directly to them.
He did. People who didn't even know the rules of baseball, who couldn't care less about defensive efficiency or war, cared deeply about Babe Ruth.
Because he was a star.
Exactly. Furthermore, the Yankees played in New York City, the undisputed media and publishing capital of the world. Every major newspaper syndicate was based there.
So the megaphone was just louder.
Much louder. And crucially, they hit home runs. The home run is the most visceral, easily digestible, and exciting act in the sport. You don't need a deep understanding of the game to appreciate a ball being launched 450 feet into the bleachers.
Anyone can understand a home run.
Right. So the Athletics were a brilliant, clinically excellent baseball team, but the Yankees were a cultural phenomenon.
And that idea that the Yankees were a cultural phenomenon operating in the media capital of the world, that perfectly transitions us into the literal stages where these phenomenons performed.
The cathedrals.
Yes, because you cannot have a sprawling empire without a palace. You need a cathedral to amplify the legend. And the architectural histories in our stack of sources give us an amazing look into how the game's greatest stadiums shift the dynasties themselves. So let's dive into the original house that Ruth built.
The creation of the original Yankee Stadium is actually a story of bitter rivalry and unintended consequences.
How so?
A lot of people don't realize that before 1923, the mighty New York Yankees did not have their own stadium. They were actually second-class citizens.
Right, really?
Yeah, they were tenants of the New York Giants, paying rent to play their home games at the Polo Grounds in Upper Manhattan.
Right, because the Giants were the aristocratic, established powerhouse of New York at the time.
Exactly. But when the Yankees purchased Babe Ruth from the Boston Red Sox before the 1920 season, that power dynamic flipped almost overnight.
Because of the home runs.
Because of the spectacle. In 1920, propelled by Ruth hitting a then unfathomable 54 home runs, the Yankees became the very first team in the history of baseball to attract more than 1 million fans in a single season.
So they were completely outdrawing their landlords in their own building?
Significantly. And the Giants' ownership was apoplectic. They were incredibly jealous of the revenue and the attention.
I can imagine.
So, following the 1922 season, the Giants evicted the Yankees from the Polo Grounds.
Just kicked them out.
Kicked them out. Their hope was that the Yankees would be forced to move to some remote borough, far away from the transit hubs of Manhattan, and simply fade into obscurity.
But that backfired spectacularly, because the Yankees owner at the time, Jacob Ruppert, was a brewery magnate with incredibly deep pockets.
Very deep pockets.
He took that massive influx of revenue generated by Ruth's million fan attendance, and instead of fading away, he decided to build a behemoth.
Across the river.
Yeah. The sources describe the 1923 opening of Yankee Stadium, built just across the Harlem River in the Bronx, as an unprecedented steel and concrete marvel.
It was a monumental shift in sports architecture. It was a massive, three-tiered stadium with a seating capacity that eventually swelled to over 70,000.
Which was unheard of.
No one had ever conceived of a baseball stadium that massive. It was built to reflect the sheer, overwhelming corporate scale of the team.
But the most incredible part to me isn't just the size. It's the literal physical design of the field itself.
Oh, the dimensions.
Right, they tailored the dimensions of the stadium to maximize the output of their superstar. They built what became known as the short porch in right field.
Which is still famous today.
Yeah, the distance from home plate to the foul pole in right field was incredibly short, perfectly designed to catch Babe Ruth's towering left-handed pull-hitting swing.
It was architectural favoritism.
Exactly. The building itself was conspiring to help him hit more home runs.
It was a monument to their own success, engineered to guarantee future success. And the poetry of it all was cemented on opening day in 1923.
Tell us what happened.
Well, with over 74,000 fans packed tightly inside against their old landlords, the Giants' Babe Ruth steps up and provides the margin of victory with a 3-run home run into those exact right field bleachers.
You can't write a better script.
You really can't. Yankee Stadium instantly became the ultimate symbol of corporate overwhelming power in American sports.
But New York had another legendary site. And if we want to understand the full emotional spectrum of baseball dynasty, we have to look at the complete opposite of that corporate behemoth in the Bronx.
We have to talk about Brooklyn.
Yes, we have to shift our geography across the city to Brooklyn and talk about Ebbets Field, the ancestral home of the Dodgers. Because if Yankee Stadium was an intimidating steel-clad corporate headquarters, Ebbets Field was an intimate brick-and-mortar neighborhood parish.
The contrast could not have been more stark. Ebbets Field was physically wedged into the tight, bustling streets of the Flatbush neighborhood.
Right in the middle of it.
Right in the middle. It was small. The fans were literally right on top of the players. You could hear individual conversations from the stands.
That's so cool.
And while the Yankees were defining themselves by relentless, almost cold-blooded, expected success, the Brooklyn Dodgers defined themselves by community-driven heartbreak and the eternal pursuit of an eventual euphoric triumph.
They were dem bums.
Exactly. The fans lovingly referred to them as dem bums. They were the ultimate relatable underdogs who constantly, agonizingly fell short against the aristocratic Yankees in the World Series throughout the 1940s and early 1950s.
And the sources outline so many of these localized, heartbreaking traumas, like the 1941 World Series against the Yankees.
Oh, Game 4.
Game 4, exactly. The Dodgers are leading. They're 1 out away from tying the series. The Yankee batter strikes out. The game should be over.
Oh, but it wasn't.
No, because the Dodger catcher, Mickey Owen, drops the third strike. The ball rolls away. The batter reaches first base safely. The Yankees spark a massive rally, win the game, and go on to win the series.
It's agonizing just hearing about it.
It became one of the most ignominious, agonizing moments in sports history. Or what about the 1951 season, where the Dodgers had a 13.5-game lead late in the summer, completely collapsed, and lost the pennant to the Giants on the shot heard round the world?
That walk-off home run in the bottom of the ninth inning.
You have a playoff game. The Dodgers fan base suffered in a way that bonded them completely to the franchise.
But that shared suffering is exactly what created a civic bond that was practically unbreakable. The team and the borough were one and the same.
They were Brooklyn.
Right. So when the Dodgers finally broke through, when they finally beat the mighty Yankees in the 1955 World Series, it wasn't just a sports victory.
It was validation.
It was a profound civic validation for the entire working-class population of Brooklyn. The eternal lament of, wait till next year, had finally actually arrived.
But the joy of that ultimate triumph was tragically short-lived, because the blueprint of this dynasty was about to undergo a violent geographic upheaval. Yes. Just a few years later, following the 1957 season, the unimaginable happened. The Dodgers owner, Walter O'Malley, frustrated by local New York politics, the aging infrastructure of Ebbets Field, and his inability to secure land for a new automobile-friendly stadium in Brooklyn, he packed up the franchise and moved them 3,000 miles west to Los Angeles.
It is hard to overstate the magnitude of that betrayal to the fans in Brooklyn. But from an empire-building perspective, O'Malley's move fundamentally shifted the power center of Major League Baseball.
Because he brought the Giants with him.
He did. He convinced the Giants to follow him west to San Francisco, instantly creating a West Coast rivalry. Suddenly, the game was truly national.
It wasn't just an East Coast sport anymore.
Exactly. The era of the intimate, neighborhood, transit-reliant ballpark like Ebbets Field was dying, and the era of the massive, sun-drenched, automobile-centric West Coast stadiums surrounded by acres of parking lots was beginning.
And we will definitely follow that trail out west to see what the Dodgers built in the sun. But first, we need to close the loop on the New York dynasty.
Because the Yankees weren't done.
Far from it. Because if we want to understand how a modern team operates, we have to look at the bridge between the 1920s and today. We have to leap from the Gilded Age of Babe Ruth directly into the late 1990s.
The modern era.
Right. Because the concept of the dynasty evolved. If the 27 Yankees were a boisterous, hard-drinking rock band sweeping the nation, the 1998 Yankees were a silent, lethal, corporate boardroom takeover.
That is the perfect way to delineate the eras. The late 1990s Yankees, managed by the incredibly stoic Joe Torre, were defined by a clinical, almost terrifying precision.
They were all business.
They were. They didn't have the oversized, mythical, scientifically scrutinized personalities of a Babe Ruth. What they had was a relentless, grinding, daily professionalism.
And it worked.
It definitely worked. In 1998, they set an American League record by winning 114 regular season games, and they culminated that marathon of a season with a clean, surgical sweep of the San Diego Padres in the World Series.
They were an absolute machine. And when you look at the architectural sources of this specific roster, the machine was built on a very specific, deeply romanticized foundation. The core four.
The homegrown talent.
Right. You had the shortstop, Derek Jeter, the closer, Mariano Rivera, the starting pitcher, Andy Pettitte, and the catcher, Jorge Posada. Along with the switch-hitting center fielder, Bernie Williams, these were all homegrown players.
Which is so rare.
It is. They were drafted and developed entirely within the Yankees minor league system. They came up together, infused with this quiet, unshakable expectation of winning.
The homegrown core provided the soul, but supplementing that soul was the sheer, overwhelming financial might of the owner, George Steinbrenner.
The boss.
Yes, the boss. Steinbrenner realized earlier than most that a sports team could be a global media property. He put together a money-generating empire centered around the iconic interlocking NY logo, leveraging local television rights to generate massive revenue.
And he wasn't afraid to spend it.
Not at all. He was one of the first owners to fully, ruthlessly utilize the modern free agency system.
Right. Like, if the '98 Yankees had a perceived weakness, say they needed a left-handed bat off the bench or a veteran starting pitcher to eat innings, Steinbrenner didn't wait for a minor leaguer to develop.
No, he simply outspent his rivals.
Yeah, he opened the checkbook and bought the absolute best available player on the open market to plug the hole.
He created a new, highly controversial standard for building a winner. The Yankees transitioned from being merely a successful baseball team to being an economic juggernaut. They weaponized their wealth.
But this brings up a philosophical point, and I want you, the listener, to really think about this for a second. We look back at Babe Ruth in the 1920s, and we celebrate the chaos.
We romanticize it.
Yeah, we celebrate the hot dogs he ate before games, the cold shots, the wild sweeping swings, the sheer indiscipline of it all. It felt like a human game played by demigods.
Right.
But the 1998 Yankees were so fundamentally perfect. They were so incredibly well managed by Tor, and they were so heavily funded by Steinbrenner that their victory almost felt inevitable.
Like it was predetermined by the payroll.
Exactly. Did the clinical perfection of the '98 Yankees, in a way, sanitize the sport? Did they replace the wild, unpredictable magic of the 1920s with a cold, corporate algorithm?
That is a profound tension that still exists in modern baseball. What do fans actually want to watch?
Yeah, do they want perfection or drama?
Well, the '98 Yankees were undeniably universally respected by baseball purists for their fundamentals, but outside of the 5 boroughs of New York, they were deeply resented.
Because they lacked vulnerability.
Exactly. They lack the vulnerability that makes sports inherently dramatic. When a team is that fundamentally sound and you reach the 9th inning and Mariano Rivera jogs out of the bullpen...
Well, let's talk about Rivera for a second, because he is the ultimate example of this clinical inevitability.
He really is. Rivera essentially threw only one pitch, the cut fastball.
Just one pitch.
But the physics of his cutter were so uniquely devastating. It would travel on a perfectly straight line and then violently dart left at the very last microsecond, shattering the wooden bats of left-handed hitters, that it was mathematically almost unhittable.
It was a buzzsaw.
It was. When he entered a game with a lead, you knew the game was over. The suspense was completely removed from the stadium.
So from an entertainment standpoint, that can feel sanitary.
Right. But from an organizational standpoint, they perfected the formula. They proved definitively that combining a disciplined, homegrown core of talent with overwhelming, unmatched financial resources creates an unstoppable, self-sustaining force.
And that exact blueprint, combining elite talent evaluation with an overwhelming, aggressive financial flex, that leads us directly out of the Bronx across the country to today's heaviest spenders and the current kings of the sport.
The Dodgers.
Yes, we follow Walter O'Malley's trail west. Let's look at the modern Los Angeles Dodgers.
When O'Malley moved the Dodgers to California in 1958, he recognized the incredible untapped economic potential of the West Coast.
A completely open market.
Yes. The sources note that almost immediately upon arriving in Los Angeles, the Dodgers became the spendingest team in baseball.
They didn't waste any time.
No, they handed out massive signing bonuses to young prospects like Frank Howard and Don Demeter, instantly using their new market size to outbid competitors. And in 1962, they opened Dodger Stadium, nestled perfectly in Chavez Ravine, with the San Gabriel Mountains painting the background.
And what's fascinating about Dodger Stadium is that today, it is actually the 3rd oldest ballpark in the major leagues, sitting right behind Fenway Park in Boston and Wrigley Field in Chicago.
which is hard to believe when you look at it.
It really is, because unlike those parks, which lean heavily into their antiquated charm, Dodger Stadium remains an absolute state-of-the-art premier venue.
They've poured so much money into it.
Exactly. The architectural sources detail how the current ownership has poured hundreds of millions into renovations, meticulously upgrading the facilities while restoring its original 1962 mid-century modern aesthetic.
Reinstalling those classic colors.
Yes, the yellow, light orange, turquoise, and sky blue seating bowl. They have beautifully maintained the cathedral, while aggressively, ruthlessly upgrading the empire that plays inside it.
And the results on the field over the last decade have perfectly mirrored that aggressive investment. We are looking at a modern dynasty that rivals anything we've discussed.
Their resume is incredible.
It is. They captured World Series championships in the shortened 2020 season. They won again in 2024. And according to the absolute latest 2026 data we have in the stack, they took the crown in 2025 as well.
Back to back.
Right. But to truly understand the sheer scale of their current dominance, you have to look at the front office strategy. You have to look at the financial maneuver that culminated in the most astonishing transaction in the history of global sports.
Right. We have arrived at the $700 million cornerstone.
The Ohtani deal.
In December of 2023, the Los Angeles Dodgers secured free agent Shohei Ohtani with a 10-year, $700 million contract. It is a number that literally breaks the brain.
It really does.
Like, it's half the GDP of a small island nation. But the raw number isn't the genius part. The structure of the deal is what proves the Dodgers front office is operating on an entirely different intellectual plane than the rest of the league.
This is where we get into the algorithmic manipulation of the rule book.
Walk us through it.
So, in Major League Baseball, there is no hard salary cap, but there is a competitive balance tax, or the CBT.
The luxury tax.
Right. It's designed to penalize teams that spend too much money in an effort to maintain competitive parity. The tax is calculated based on the average annual value, the AAV, of a player's contract.
So normally, if you sign a guy for $700 million over 10 years, his AAV is $70 million a year.
Correct.
And that massive $70 million chunk hits your team's payroll calculation every single season, absolutely crippling your ability to stay under the tax threshold and sign other good players.
Exactly. But the Dodgers and Ohtani agreed to a highly unique, unprecedented structure. They agreed to defer $680 million of that $700 million until after the 10-year contract is completed.
It's still so wild to say out loud.
I know. So from 2024 to 2033, while Ohtani is actually playing for the Dodgers, he is only being paid a base salary of $2 million a year.
Now, if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, okay, but he's still getting the $700 million eventually. So how does that help the Dodgers with the luxury tax today?
It's a fair question.
And this is where it gets brilliantly nefarious. Explain the math here.
It comes down to a financial concept called net present value. Major League Baseball and the Players Union recognize that $680 million paid 10 years from now is not worth the same as $680 million paid today due to inflation and the time value of money.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the league calculates the present-day value of that deferred money to figure out the luxury tax hit. Because of the massive deferrals, the league calculated the present-day value of Ohtani's contract not at $700 million, but at roughly $460 million.
Wait, wow. Which means his average annual value, the number that actually counts against the Dodgers' luxury tax cap, is only $46 million a year, not $70 million.
Exactly.
By having Ohtani agree to wait a decade to get his money, the Dodgers artificially slashed their cap hit by $24 million a season.
It's incredible leverage.
They basically created a massive loophole that granted their front office the payroll flexibility to immediately pivot and sign other elite, high-priced free agents, like Japanese pitching sensation Yoshinobu Yamamoto, without completely destroying their tax thresholds.
It perfectly mirrors the relentless pursuit of excellence we saw in the 27 Yankees stacking their lineup, or Steinbrenner's 98 Yankees buying every piece they needed. But it is adapted for the modern, highly regulated salary cap era.
It's the ultimate financial flex.
It really is. They bought the greatest player on the face of the earth and structured the receipt so they could still afford to buy a championship roster to surround him.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the man himself. Because every dynasty, no matter how clever the accountants are, is ultimately anchored by a transcendent figure on the grass.
The anomaly.
Yes. We started this deep dive with the centerpiece of the 1927 dynasty, Babe Ruth. We now have to connect him across a century to the centerpiece of the 2026 Dodgers dynasty, we have to talk about the two-way titans.
It is the most natural comparison in the history of the sport, and yet, sitting here discussing it, it still feels completely surreal that we are witnessing it.
It feels impossible.
It does. To truly comprehend the magnitude of Shohei Ohtani, we have to quickly revisit Babe Ruth, because the loud, booming narrative of Ruth the home run hitter often overshadows his actual origins in the sport.
Right. Let's clarify this, because I think a huge percentage of casual fans forget this entirely. Before Babe Ruth was the Sultan of SWAT, before he was a Yankee hitting 60 home runs and pointing to the bleachers, he was an elite, dominant left-handed pitcher for the Boston Red Sox.
He wasn't just good, he was arguably the best southpaw in the entire American League.
The sources are very clear on this.
They are. The sources remind us that Ruth won 94 career games as a starting pitcher. In the 1916 and 1918 World Series, pitching on the biggest stage imaginable, he threw 29.2 consecutive scoreless innings.
Almost 30 scoreless innings in the World Series.
A record that stood for over 40 years. He possessed a devastating curveball and immense stamina.
So he was legitimately on a Hall of Fame trajectory strictly as a pitcher. So why did he stop?
He stopped because of the sheer, immense, undeniable value of his bat combined with the limitations of the human body.
Biology basically intervened.
Exactly. In that era, the physical toll of pitching 9 agonizing innings every 4th day and then playing the outfield and hitting every other day was considered biologically unsustainable.
You would just break down.
Right. Management realized his bat generated too much offense and too much ticket revenue to keep him in the dugout on the days he wasn't pitching. By the time he was sold to the Yankees, he was essentially forced to give up pitching almost entirely so he could be in the lineup to hit every single day.
So the two-way player, the guy who could dominate on the mound and at the plate, became a lost art.
It became a historical anomaly that the sport collectively decided was physically impossible to replicate.
Until Shohei Ohtani arrived from Japan and decided to break the simulation.
Seriously, what Ohtani is doing today is frankly far more difficult than what Ruth did a century ago.
How so?
You have to consider the environment. We are currently in an era of extreme, hyper-focused athletic specialization. Pitchers today are trained to throw with maximum violent effort on every single pitch.
Just going max effort constantly.
Right. This has led to the rise of complex bullpen management, the use of openers who only pitch 1 inning, and a terrifying epidemic of elbow and shoulder injuries because human arms are not meant to throw a baseball 100 miles per hour repeatedly.
The torque is just too much.
Exactly. And conversely, hitters are facing a daily barrage of breaking balls with spin rates that literally defy traditional physics.
It's harder than ever to hit.
So the idea that one single human being could train their body and their mind to dominate both of these highly specialized, incredibly demanding, disparate disciplines at the exact same time is staggering.
And the timeline of Ohtani's dominance with the Dodgers is just absurd. Like, let's look closely at the historic 2024 season.
A legendary season.
Right. Entering that year, Ohtani had undergone major elbow surgery. His arm was being reconstructed. He was medically prevented from throwing a pitch.
He couldn't play defense or pitch at all.
So, deprived of half of his skill set, what does he do? He focuses his obsessive drive entirely on his offensive production and his base running. And the result? He completely shatters the known limits of the sport. He hit 54 home runs and stole 59 bases.
He established the first 50-50 club in Major League history. He created a club where he is the sole member.
Which is insane because the skill sets contradict each other.
They absolutely do. To hit 50 home runs requires immense torque-heavy rotational power. To steal 50 bases requires explosive sprinting speed and incredibly jarring slides into the dirt. Those two physical profiles almost never exist in the same body. It was arguably the finest single-season offensive display in the sport's history.
But the true miracle, the reason we're doing this deep dive today, is what the June 2026 sources are showing us. Because Ohtani's elbow has healed. He is not just a designated hitter anymore.
He is back on the mound, and he is obliterating the competition.
I'm looking at these mid-season 2026 MLB reports right now, and the stats are breathtaking. As a starting pitcher, he took a sub-1.00 ERA deep into the month of June.
Which is unheard of for a starting pitcher in this era.
Right now, he is sitting at a 1.58 earned run average. He has 86 strikeouts in just 79.2 innings of work. And he's throwing a career-high 100-mile-per-hour fastball.
The velocity is actually up after the surgery.
The sources highlight a recent game against the Minnesota Twins. He was on the mound, carving them up, dominating their hitters with that 100-mile-per-hour heat. And then in the same game, pulling double duty as the Dodgers' leadoff hitter, he steps to the plate and laces a scorching RBI single to center field to catalyze his own offense.
It's like something out of a comic book.
He is doing the job of two elite all-stars simultaneously.
And if you look at his offensive metrics, while maintaining that 1.58 ERA on the mound, he is slashing .295, .414, .549.
Okay, let's decode that slash line for anyone listening who doesn't live inside baseball reference pages.
Please do.
That means he is hitting for a .295 batting average, which is excellent. He has a .414 on-base percentage, meaning he is safely reaching base over 40% of the time he steps to the plate, which is elite table setting.
Elite.
And his slugging percentage is .549, bolstered by 17 home runs already. He is an elite contact hitter, an elite on-base guy, and a premier power threat, all while being the best pitcher in the league.
Which is exactly why the All-Star voting looks the way it does. The reports show he is the top overall vote getter in the entire National League, pulling in over 3.34 million votes in Phase 1 of the balloting alone.
3.3 million votes.
Yeah. He is virtually guaranteed the starting spot as the National League's designated hitter, while simultaneously being the front-runner to actually start the game on the mound as the pitcher.
Now, I have to push back here, or at least pose a philosophical question about how we consume greatness today versus 100 years ago.
Okay, I like where this is going.
When we discussed the 1927 Yankees and Babe Ruth earlier, we acknowledged that so much of their legacy is built on myth, on word of mouth, and on flowery sports writer poetry.
Right, the legends.
They didn't have radar guns in 1927. They didn't have exit velocity measurements. If Ruth hit a ball hard, the newspaper just said he hit it a country mile, and the legend grew in the minds of the fans.
There was an immense amount of romantic mystery.
Exactly. But today, we live in the StatCast era. Our sources don't use poetry. They dive deep into the cold, hard physics of the ball. We measure exit velocity, launch angle, barrels, spin rates.
The data is inescapable.
We know definitively that a barrel, the perfect mathematical contact, requires an exit velocity of at least 98 miles per hour and a launch angle between 26 and 30 degrees.
Right, we can define the perfect hit.
We know exactly how good Ohtani is, down to the millimeter to contact and the RPM of the ball leaving his fingers. So my question to you is, does having all this clinical, ubiquitous data make Ohtani's achievements more impressive because we can scientifically, undeniably prove his superiority over his peers? Or does the data strip away the romantic mystery that allowed Babe Ruth to become a god?
That is perhaps the most profound tension in modern baseball fandom. Analytics have absolutely removed the folklore from the game.
We don't have to guess anymore.
We don't. We no longer have to guess how far a ball went or rely on a scout's subjective memory. The Hawkeye cameras mounted in the stadiums tell us that the ball went exactly 463 feet with an exit velocity of 116.4 miles per hour.
Perfectly measured.
We even use metrics like PCA-based pure fastball quality, which uses principal component analysis to evaluate a pitch based on its velocity, its vertical and horizontal break, its spin rate, and the pitcher's extension off the mound.
Wow.
Yeah, it mathematically grades a pitch's effectiveness regardless of whether the batter swings or not. It is incredibly clinical.
It sounds like an aerospace engineering report.
It really does. But I would argue vehemently that when it comes to Shohei Ohtani, the data actually enhances the awe.
Oh, really?
Yes. It doesn't strip away the magic. It validates it. When you look at the raw, unfeeling numbers, when you look at the PCA fastball quality, putting him in the 99th percentile of pitchers, and then you look at his launch angles and barrel percentages, putting him in the 99th percentile of hitters, and you realize that one single human cardiovascular system, one set of ligaments, is generating both of those data sets.
It's mind-blowing.
The science becomes its own kind of poetry. The data proves that what we are watching isn't an illusion. It isn't a myth fabricated by a New York newspaper. He is genuinely, mathematically breaking the models of human performance.
So we've covered a massive amount of ground today. What does this all mean? We have traveled from the roaring, culturally overpowering 1927 Yankees playing inside a custom-built cathedral through the clinical, heavily funded corporate precision of the 1998 Yankees, all the way to the modern, data-driven, loophole-exploiting empire of the Los Angeles Dodgers. What is the through line?
The through line is that while the game's daily strategies have evolved, from inside baseball to the launch angle revolution, and while the stadiums have shifted from brick neighborhood parishes to billion-dollar West Coast entertainment complexes, the core blueprint of a dynasty remains remarkably brutally consistent.
It requires capital and anomalies.
Exactly. Dynasties require a ruthless, uncompromising commitment to talent acquisition. They require the financial muscle and the front office audacity to outlast, outthink, and outspend the competition.
You have to be aggressive.
Whether that is Jacob Ruppert using beer money to build a 70,000-seat stadium in the Bronx, George Steinbrenner leveraging regional sports networks to buy free agents, or the Dodgers' current ownership utilizing net present value to defer $680 million and build a super team under the luxury cap.
Strategy is the same.
But most importantly, all the money in the world means nothing without the anchor. Dynasties are built around generational anomalies. Players like Ruth and Ohtani who forced the sport to redefine what is physically possible.
And for you, listening to this right now, I think it's worth taking a step back to appreciate the specific slice of history we are living through. Because as sports fans, we are so often nostalgic.
We always look back.
Yeah, we read the old black and white box scores of Babe Ruth, we look at the sepia-toned photos of Ebbets Field, and we wish we could have been alive to see them play. But we are incredibly, undeniably lucky because we are watching the modern 1927 Babe Ruth unfold right now. We get to watch it in 4K high definition every single night with Shohei Ohtani.
We are witnessing the absolute peak of human athletic potential happening in real time. We are watching the ghost of the 1920s manifest in the 2020s.
Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. For the last 100 years, ever since the Red Sox and Yankees forced Babe Ruth off the pitcher's mound and into the outfield permanently, baseball has operated on a fundamental lie.
A huge lie.
The sport has told kids in Little League, in high school, and in college that eventually you have to choose. You can be a pitcher or you can be a hitter. The human body simply cannot handle the stress of both.
It was accepted as a biological fact.
But Shohei Ohtani has taken that century-old rule, that foundational lie, and torn it to shreds. He has proven that the human body absolutely can handle both, and not just at an average level, but at the highest, most elite possible level of the sport. So the question is, now that the ceiling has been shattered, what happens next?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Are there thousands of kids practicing right now who will refuse to choose? Will we see a whole new generation of two-way players emerge in the next 10 or 20 years? Will Ohtani's legacy fundamentally rewrite the rules and the roster constructions of the sport forever?
It is entirely possible that the blueprint of a baseball player is being completely redrawn as we speak, at every level of the game.
Usually, we expect a blueprint to be clean, broken or not broken. We expect to put tab A into slot B and see the building rise exactly as planned. But baseball isn't an engineering project. It's a living, breathing thing. It's constantly evolving, constantly frustrating us, and constantly proving that sometimes the greatest, most enduring structures are built in the murkiest of waters. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.